Perfect. Hi, my name is Daniel Epstein. I am the founder of the Unreasonable Institute and Unreasonable at Sea. And I agree, I'm dead serious about being unreasonable and unrealistic. For me, it boils down to a quote. Albert Einstein, he said, if at first an idea doesn't seem to be insane, then there's no hope for it. And so today I'm going to share with you a truly crazy, slightly uncomfortable, rather insane experiment that we're running called Unreasonable at Sea. But before I get into that, I want to start with a bias that I have. And this is a genuine bias. I need to get it out of the way to be candid with you all. And that is a belief that entrepreneurship is the answer to most every single issue we face today. And I believe that to my heart, to my core, genuinely, for two reasons. One is I've seen it. I've worked with over 100 entrepreneurs in 70 countries who are solving the hardest problems I think that exist of our time. I'll talk about that. But the second is if we zoom out and we get really abstract for a second, where most of the world sees issues and problems, entrepreneurial thinking, they see opportunities and they see solutions. And I think in a world with so many issues, so many problems, so many challenges, we desperately need to foster that level of thinking. Now, that said, I do have a confession. I feel a little bit out of place in this audience because I'm a business school dropout. And amongst so many business leaders and thought leaders and practitioners, I sometimes do question why I'm on this stage. But I did learn something very valuable in Advertising 101. And that was that there are two rules to advertising. The first one is three things sell in advertising: sex, children, and puppies. Second rule of advertising, never mix the first with the second two. So before this talk, I Googled the word optimistic puppy. And that is because I have a confession, which is I am an optimist. When I look at the world today, I think we're in better shape than we've ever been before in the history of humankind. The number of democracies have tripled in the last 100 years. Literacy rates have halved in the last 50 years. Our access to information is incredible. Life expectancy has doubled in the last 70 years. The world today is better than it's ever been before in the history of humankind. And when I say this, especially to my dad, he always looks at me and he goes, "Golly, you're not an optimist, you're a naive optimist." And I push back and I say, "No, Dad, I'm an impatient optimist." Because although the world is better today than it's ever been before, it's not good enough. Right? We know the numbers. 1 billion people live in absolute poverty on less than $1 a day. Another billion live without access to clean drinking water. We live in a world today, 2.4 million children under the age of 5 die of preventable diseases like diarrhea. The world today may be better than it's ever been before, but it's not good enough. And it's this juxtaposed belief system, this impatient optimism that has driven me straight into the heart of entrepreneurship because I don't believe we can solve these problems fast enough. Let's go here. And to rationalize a seemingly irrational name, this is George Bernard Shaw. He's the patron saint of the Unreasonable Institute. He has a famous quote. He said, "The reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable one persists in adapting the world to himself. Therefore, all progress is dependent on the unreasonable person." In a world where 2 billion people live on less than $2 a day, if George Bernard Shaw is right, if progress depends on unreasonable people, then we can't afford not to bet on them. That's what I've dedicated my life to. That's what we do at the Unreasonable Institute. This is basically our business plan at the Unreasonable Institute. We scour the globe for the smartest entrepreneurs in the world working on the toughest problem sets. You know, as entrepreneurs, as business people, we design things to solve problem sets. I believe that we can choose which problem sets we want to solve, and why not solve those worthy of our lives' work, i.e. the seemingly intractable social and environmental challenges. So we go out, we scour the earth. We have about 200 partners in over 180 countries. And we look for some of the smartest entrepreneurs working on the toughest problems, and we bring them to our home base in Boulder, Colorado, to run this organization, the Unreasonable Institute. It's an accelerator for early-stage entrepreneurs trying to solve these tough problems, whether it's prevention of honor killing in Pakistan, ultra-affordable DNA diagnostic devices in Argentina, or changing how we finance solar here in the United States. We try to scale up their efforts. Our stated goal here is to help the entrepreneurs achieve 10x growth within 24 months of leaving the program. What's amazing from my perspective is this is actually working. Over 60% of our alumni have hit that metric. Each year we work with about 25 entrepreneurs from 20 countries, bring them together for 6 weeks, and we really try to accelerate them. What we've seen, though, is that this isn't good enough. This is necessary, but it's not sufficient. Because some of our best alumni, they're starting to hit a glass ceiling, where they are effectively addressing a very serious social or environmental need in their country. They have a profitable model wrapped around it, so it's hitting scale, but they can't scale internationally. And when we zoomed out, we looked at this problem, we realized that it's very common for companies in North America or in Europe to hit it big and then to scale globally, but it's almost unheard of for companies out of Algeria or Liberia or even China or India to start and then to scale internationally quickly. And we figured we need to help our alumni, we need to help these incredible entrepreneurs break through that glass ceiling. So what better idea than a totally insane one, going off of Albert Einstein's quote, that if it doesn't start off crazy, then there's no hope for it. Well, there's a lot of hope for this idea. We partnered with MIT's Media Labs, Stanford's D School, and an organization called Semester at Sea to launch this project called Unreasonable at Sea. It's a radical experiment in transnational entrepreneurship. We're going to be putting some of the top technology companies on Earth on a ship as we sail around the world. We'll be taking 100 days, starting in January, sailing about 25,000 nautical miles, going into 14 different countries, and really trying to experiment on what it takes to move innovations into new markets. So it's something we're very excited about. I'm a little bit terrified about knowing how soon it's coming up, but we think that this experiment is certainly one worth jumping into. And when we started this, 9 months ago was the genesis of this idea. So in terms of partnerships, it's moved really quickly in order to get this off the ground. But 5 months ago, if we would have been having a one-on-one conversation and you asked me how I was feeling, I would have told you that I was terrified. And I was terrified because I wasn't convinced we could find some of the smartest entrepreneurs out there to join us on this voyage. And the reason I was so nervous is this is a strange pedigree for a company. Right? We're talking about entrepreneurs, technology companies that have globally relevant technologies that are solving some of the hardest problems, that are ready to scale internationally. So they're busting at the seams in terms of their business, and they can afford to have their senior leadership on a boat for 100 days as it sails around the world. This is very unusual. But we put a call for our applications out there, thought we would test it out. We had over 1,000 companies apply, over 110 countries. Ultimately, 90% of them maybe weren't fit, but 10% were interesting, which was over 100 companies. Ultimately, we selected 11. We're bringing on teams of 2 to 3, and there's 25 entrepreneurs in total from those 11 companies. And genuinely, to my core, I believe these are 25 of the smartest people on Earth we just haven't heard of yet. Yet being very intentional. And I want to talk about these companies briefly to make this a little more real. So one of the companies, it's 2 guys, best friends out of Mexico City. They're MIT dropouts. They got in when they were 16. They dropped out when they were 17. And so I'm interviewing them on the phone. I was like, you guys had a full ride to MIT. How could you drop out? And they said that, in their words, the velocity of doing wasn't fast enough. I was like, okay. And so they go back to Mexico City, and they devote themselves towards curing blindness. They have 4 design constraints. The first one is that somebody with no eyeballs needs to be able to see. The second one is that the solution has to be non-invasive, non-surgical. The third design constraint is that it has to be affordable to the average person. The fourth is that you have to be able to see in 2 dimensions as well as 3 dimensions. So you need to be able to read. This to me seemed impossible, but 11 years after setting out on this course, 8 medical trials, they've created it. More or less as a pair of glasses with a camera on the front of it. This camera sees in the same peripheral vision that you or I see. It takes in 10,000 pixels in real time, has a computer processing unit on the side, and that transmits down to a little pad that sits on your palm, just on top of your skin. And it has these 10 little soft rods on it that touch your palm in different patterns and frequencies and pressures. Now what's amazing is after wearing this device for 3 weeks, your brain adapts, your visual cortex gets ignited, and you can actually see the pixels that come through that camera in real time through the tactile touch on your hand. The reason this works is, if you think about it, bats do this in a different way. They see, they're blind, but they see through sonar. So our brain has the ability to actually see through other senses. Sonar is one of them. Tactile touch is a little bit harder, but it works. And so I interviewed these guys. I didn't believe them. So I had the head of artificial intelligence at Stanford interview them. And I got a phone call, and he said, yeah, I think this is real. And he sent me a video from one of their medical trials. And it's this old lady. She has no eyeballs. This is a terrible birth defect. It's really tragic. She's about 70, and she's in front of a camera, and she has a testimonial. And she says, no eyeballs. She says, I walk up to my house, now I can see the whole thing. Walk up to the front door, see the doorknob, reach out. I open the door. I look across my living room into the kitchen. There's a kitchen table. There's a book on the table. Walk across the living room, sit down at the table. I open the book and I read it. Now, mind you, no eyeballs, in her 70s, no training. Her brain, it's plastic enough, just like ours, to naturally adapt. So that is one of the companies. They have potentially $1 billion technology. There's a lot of applications for this. Much more importantly, these guys, if we can go global, they're Nobel laureates. Second company out of Singapore, I call them modern-day alchemists. They're taking the most prolific waste of our time, and they are converting it into something worth more than gold. They're taking carbon emissions, they apply a nanotechnology to it, create a structure called carbon nanotubes, and they convert it into a metal. This metal is 100 times lighter than steel and 60 times stronger. They then use that in kind of ultra-efficient batteries, computer processing chips, as well as spaceships. What's important, though, is this material is incredibly valuable. So they are profitably sequestering carbon. And when you do that, you change the game. When you take a waste and you make it profitable to capture it, it turns into a commodity. And the day that the world realizes carbon emissions are a commodity, the day this climate crisis will change. A third company out of India, 23-year-old entrepreneur, he's a high school dropout. He looks at the subcontinent of India. He realizes that access to information in terms of demographics is entirely skewed. 11% of the population in India has access to the internet, 88% to dumb phones. So they have SMS. And he realizes, well, we need to skip that or leapfrog that. How do we give the free information that's online to SMS-based phones? And he created what is now today the most used SMS application in all of India. It's 120 million active users every day. This is pretty much like Google of SMS. You can text his company any question, driving directions from Mumbai to Chennai. What's very interesting is it's photographic. So you could take a picture of a cyst on your foot, say, what is this? He'll send back results. He'll say, we think it is this. You should go to your local health clinic, which is located here, whatever it might be. And what's amazing is, like Google, it's free. Because what he now has is the largest advertising platform for SMS in the entire subcontinent of India. Right? Of course, Deepak here wants to scale globally, so he's joining us on the ship to try to bridge new markets, take this technology where it needs to be. There are 5.1 billion people on Earth with dumb phones without access to the internet. But that's not it. I skipped ahead a little bit. I just blew the surprise. It's not just about these companies. We have 11 companies. Those are just 3 of them. It's not just about going into these ports. It's also about mentorship for us. So I'll go quickly because it seems like my lightning talk is cutting short. But it was 8 weeks ago. I got a phone call about 5 a.m. It looks like it's from South Africa. I pick it up. I'm like, hey, maybe this is the guy. I pick it up, and sure enough, it's the Archbishop Desmond Tutu. He calls me on the phone. I've been emailing him for 6 months saying, hey, you should be a mentor on this program. Never thought this would happen. And if anybody here knows Desmond, he's like very jovial, so he's just laughing the whole time we're talking. And he goes, I want to be a mentor. And I said, no way. And he said, yeah. He's like, I wouldn't miss it for the world. And I said, okay. He's like, well, when do you want to join us? And he goes, well, I'll be there in San Diego at the start. I said, great. I was like, when are you going to get off? He goes, at home. And I was like, Desmond, in South Africa? And he goes, yeah. And I was like, just to be clear, we're not on an airplane, we're on a ship. San Diego to South Africa, it's 11 weeks, 77 days. Are you sure? And he says, of course, I wouldn't miss it for the world. And this cascaded throughout our mentors. So we have 20 mentors. We have the founder of WordPress, Matt Mullenweg. We're trying to get him on the ship for 6 weeks. One of my heroes is in the audience, Cameron Alakian. I think the greatest entrepreneurs out of the Valley. He's joining us for about a month, the founder of ER and Law & Order for 8 weeks, head of Google X for 7 weeks. And these people, their most expensive commodity is not money, it's time. And yet they're coming on the ship with us, not for days, not for weeks, but for months. So you can imagine for us, we look at this as one of the most radical experiments, entrepreneurship, technology, innovation. And the reason I'm here today, and I'll be done with this, is that we're looking to partner with some of the largest companies on Earth to join us on this voyage. Technology companies that are global, that care about innovation, that care about impact, and that care about being on the bleeding edge of these types of trends in a rapidly changing world. We've partnered now with GE, with Nike, and with Xbox. We have room for 2 more international partners. There are 2 rooms on the ship, and we're going to be closing those out this week. So if anybody has a company or a foundation or a fund and would like to join us on this wild experiment, we'd love for you to come with us. I will skip that story about Wayne Gretzky. This is my email address. Feel free to reach out, and I'll be here the next couple days. Thank you so much.